Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to the Using Your Voice as a Pathway to Success session of the 2020 Virtual Great Lakes Games, where we at GLASA are sad that we weren't able to join together in person, but we're thrilled that you're able to come for this session. We first want to thank all of our wonderful sponsors for this event. Before we begin, I just want to go over a couple housekeeping items. In order to avoid any background noise, all attendees have been muted for the duration of the session. If you do have a question for the panelists, please make sure to use the Q&A button at the bottom or top of your screen. When using your chat function, please make sure to change your message to be sent to all panelists and attendees. Feel free to go ahead and introduce yourself and say where you're from. Without any further ado, I'd like to introduce I'd like to introduce Glenn Mary, the Executive Director over at Move United.
Hi, thank you everyone. We're really glad to see you, and we're really excited to be a sponsor of the event this week. And as some of you may be looking at our name for the first time in this context, Move United has emerged from the merger of both Disabled Sports USA and Adaptive Sports USA just about a month ago. So we're really excited. This is one of our first times out in front of the public with it. But I wanted to talk a little bit, quick introduction to today's panel discussion. And when we put this panel together more than a month ago and kind of prior to recent events in America, our focus was on providing key takeaways for athletes on how they can speak up for what they need to be successful as athletes with a disability. The killing of George Floyd, amongst so many other recent public examples of racism and violence in our country, has really redirected the conversation and attention in the United States. And the redirection around Black Lives Matter is an important redirection, and it's something that, as it should be. Move United, as a disability movement, stands against injustice. And in the context of recent events, we expect that today's conversation may take some different twists and turns than we originally thought. And that as we ask you to speak and ask questions around yourself and your experience as an athlete with a disability, some of you are also going to be speaking on behalf of yourself as a person of color with a disability. And we recognize that and we appreciate that. You know, as we came together as Move United, as a movement, it was to force a more inclusive society. And part of that discussion is about how to be more inclusive of Black lives as well. With a plan for real and measurable outcomes as a result of those discussions. And so those discussions and planning have been ongoing, and we expect that in the coming weeks, we'll be able to share what that plan looks like. But we're not going to make a statement without a plan and without kind of the steps forward in doing so. And so today and all the time, we encourage people to have candid discussions and reflections because they make us stronger as a movement and as an organization. And we encourage you to contribute, and we value those contributions today, both from the participants and the panelists. I want to say thank you for being part of the sessions, and I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say. So thank you.
Thanks, Glenn. This is Lily Jagosinski from Move United, and we really appreciate everything that you've started off at saying. And I'm super excited to now introduce our panelists as well. And so we are going to pull up our slides, and again, just welcoming everyone to Using Your Voice as a Pathway to Success. We have some awesome athletes here, esteemed high-level athletes, as well as just different backgrounds and demographics. And so I'd love to introduce Jessica and Michael and Tony. Thank you for being here, and I want to hear a little bit more about you guys as well. Feel free to tell us about what sports you've been involved in, what level of athletics, and a little bit more. So Jessica, I'd like to start off with you.
So hi everyone, I'm Jessica. I am from Cedar Rapids, Iowa. I'm currently studying biology at the University of Northern Iowa. I am a lower right leg amputee, and I specialize in track, specifically short sprints and discus. I got into the adaptive sports movement when I was around 11 or 12 years old, and I've been in love with it ever since. I did the Rio 2016 games, and I'm currently training for the Tokyo 2021 games.
Yes, thank you, Jessica, for being here. Michael, I'll turn it over to you. Tell us a little bit about yourself, please.
Hi, I'm Michael. I am a senior now in high school. I got started in Nordic and biathlon recently, but Nordic skiing, this will be my 6th season. And I compete at and I'm on the development team for US Para Nordic, and I am training for the Beijing Winter Olympics.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. Tony, we'll turn it over to you now. And you are on mute, Tony, so you'll have to unmute yourself.
Good morning. Hi, everybody. My name is Tony Drees. I am a Gulf War veteran. I was injured when I was 23, and I was fortunate I kept my leg. And so it wasn't until 2018, when I was 50 years old, I got my leg amputated at the right hip. Since then, I am a gold medalist downhill skier nationally, gold wheelchair slalom racer, and power lifter. I participate in yoga and most anything. I golf on one leg, I ski on one leg. Anything that is hard, I try it. If it's hard on 2 legs, I try and do it on 1 leg. I'm happy to be here today. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Tony. And I wanted to also mention Kristen Duquette. She was our 4th panelist here today, and she ended up having a family emergency, so she unfortunately isn't here, but we hope to engage her in future Move United programs as well, but we appreciate her efforts to be here. Now I'd like to open up and figure out kind of who's in this room right now. And so I've launched a poll, and I'd love for you to tell us who you are. Are you an athlete, a coach, a parent, a program provider, or other? So you'll see a window that's popped up and you can vote, and I'll give you about 30 seconds to get it done. Thank you, everyone. I'll give you about 5 more seconds to get your vote in or poll in. Awesome. Alrighty, I'm going to end the poll now and share the results. And so we have about 46% of you are athletes who are in this room, and about 46% are program providers, and then a few others. So we really have a lot of athletes here today that want to learn how to use their voice, and we are looking forward to the panelists kind of discussing more. So now I'd love to dive in to each athlete and tell us a little bit more about your experiences. As an athlete with a disability, how have you had to step up and speak up for yourself on whether it's a school program, a community program, or a sports team, and what have you experienced? So Jessica, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so growing up in small town Iowa, I was the only disabled child and disabled athlete through pretty much all through college now. I started off when I joined track, I was on a local team and I was the only disabled person. I didn't know how to advocate for myself, and I didn't know what my needs were and how to deal with that. And then when I got to middle school and high school, it was the same thing again. I was the only disabled athlete. I ran into a few coaches and staff with my schools who were not great at adapting to me and figuring out what I needed. And looking back, there was a lot of miseducation and uneducation on how to deal with disabled and adaptive athletes. I've had the genuine pleasure of finding coaches now that are able to work with me and adapt to that. But it's taken a lot of years for me, unfortunately, to be at that stage and be able to find people who are willing to work as disabled athletes.
Thanks, Jessica. And Michael, tell us a little bit about you as well.
So in my high school, we don't have, for Nordic skiing, we don't have something called time factoring, which is a certain percentage taken off based upon how disabled you are, essentially, kind of. There's criteria for all of it, but it's a certain percentage off for Nordic skiing, and my conference doesn't have it, and because I'm a varsity athlete, I work really close with one of my coaches on the US Para team, Beth Ann Chamberlain, who is advocating for me and to change the rules for not only our conference, our section, and our state to get that so everyone who is adaptive can Nordic ski at an equal playing field.
Awesome. And Michael, I'll continue on with yours as well. Is this something that you spoke up for? Was this an idea that you had and brought it to your coach, or how did that come about?
So I had been skiing for a while now. So I started skiing when I was like JV development, and the first time I ever got into like the high school like varsity team, I was at the lower end, and I wasn't really scoring points for my team, and I really wanted to, and I had a lot of potential. And I was taught, one of my coaches now, she time factored sort of where I would be like, okay, so this is where you would be. And I was like, oh, could we apply it more? And we asked Beth Ann, because she's this great, wonderful person who's like knows what to do. And she was like, yeah, let's do this. We need to get this. But it was very like me just wanting to succeed more and see the level of effort that I'm putting in and see the same result essentially.
Awesome. Thank you for that information. And congratulations for speaking up for yourself on that. Tony, let's turn it over to you.
Hi. Yeah, my experience was interesting because at age 50, right, I had to go, fortunately, I had some veteran organizations that I got linked to directly from my VA. So Ignite Adaptive Skiing, NSCD in Colorado up in Winter Park, Disabled Sports USA, now Move United, they were up there. And so I just really tried to, everything that was referred to me by my VA, I signed up for it. So I did golf lessons, I did archery lessons, I did skiing lessons. I tried to do everything I could. And then from there, the people that I met, the volunteers, the coaches, the staff members, I tried to connect with them and said, hey, like for instance, skiing's my jam, right? So I do downhill skiing on one leg. And so to be a 50-year-old and take ski lessons is a hard thing anyway. Be a 50-year-old take ski lessons with one leg and try someone that's adaptive is a very difficult thing. But then to be a 50-year-old that's a beast mode and out skiing all these ones, I'm being serious, like to have someone that can help coach you at your level, right? To help you so that you're always challenged and that you're not just skiing because it's adaptive skiing. Now you're adaptive skiing, congratulations. No, how do you get to be beast mode at this, right? And so that's always been a challenge for me. And I remember specifically in my ski instruction, every week I'd have a different ski instructor, sometimes twice in one day, right? Like I'd wear them out and they'd go get another one. And I really appreciated the fact that they didn't try and slow me down for their program parameters. Like, oh, we only have XYZ volunteers today. They made phone calls, they did whatever they could, and they got people to help me be able to be coached at my level. And so advocate for yourself, and especially if you're a veteran, seek the pathways that are already out there.
Awesome. Thank you, Tony. All right, so now we'll turn it over to a little bit more advice that you guys are giving to athletes that are out there. So what should I do if a program is not meeting my needs? Jessica, what would you suggest to someone?
So that second bullet point is exactly what my family and I did. Creating a list was so important for me. I could come home from a practice and I could write down things that did work and things that did not work and figure out what I needed to adapt to. And getting into a community online of other disabled athletes, I really was able to talk with them and say what works for you, what doesn't work for you, how have you adapted to this? So I could bring that list to my coaches and say, this isn't going to work. I need to find something other way to do this. Sometimes they would just say, I need to scrap this entire thing in general. Sometimes I would just need to tweak a certain part of a workout or a certain part of something we were doing. But just having that list made for a much easier communication for them to look at that and just treat that like you would any other hurdle that you would come to for any other athlete. So that really helped communication. And I am someone who hates confrontation. So that was very scary for me to come up to a coach and just tell them that something wasn't going to work. But it is so beneficial to be able to gather that courage to do that and to know that you have that community that helps you, because you shouldn't have to adapt to a program. A program should want to adapt to you as an athlete because you are valued as an athlete. Being disabled does not take away your value as a person in that community.
Yes, Jessica, thank you. Michael, we'll turn it over to you. What should I do if a program is not meeting my needs?
I would say communicate a lot. There was a lot of communication between me and not only like my parents, like through my parents, because I myself also don't like confrontation. But it was also like me trying to advocate to the coach, like, okay, my shins are hurting from this 3-hour long ski. And my coaches are like, wait, you don't use poles to ski. Maybe you shouldn't ski for 3 hours. Like, that's insane for anyone, especially for a no pole athlete. So for me to communicate, like, what am I feeling? How is my body reacting to these different stressors is very important, because I'm an adaptive athlete, and because I don't use poles, that means my body is going to react differently than other athletes, and that stressing my body properly is what we want, and if we stress it wrong, that would be bad. So communicate with your coaches, your teachers, your parents, just everything, how you're feeling that day too is also very important.
Nice. Yes. Thank you, Michael. Tony, what about you?
I'm a military guy, so we're like the opposite. And so what I would say to my veteran athletes, as you find yourself getting frustrated, and you may, be calm. It's not personal. If there's an error or an opportunity in a program, it's your privilege to say, hey, could we do this? Or I think this, or maybe this would help, right? And so it's been my privilege to help kind of navigate this thing and see, like, the program organizers and the people who are doing it, they want for you to succeed. So just take your time. Don't be frustrated with yourself either. Like, I came from this is special, like, I was injured. So I went from being a beast mode. Now I'm amputated. Now how do I beast mode again, right? And so you have to stay calm. You have to be patient. And so that's the thing I would say to the warrior athletes is don't over-engage. Take your time, reflect, take the lesson. I find myself being frustrated, right? There was times I was just frustrated, plain frustrated. And I had to sit there and just, wait a minute, I'm supposed to be having fun, right? Like, I'm skiing. And I had to remind myself, like, hey, this is sport. And so there was, take your time, right? As they don't like to engage, we like to engage a little bit more. We're trained to engage. And so I would say, temper that engagement for the civilians and sometimes in some cases, youth that you're working around, temper it.
Absolutely. Thank you. I like how you guys both talked about the emotional side as well. Jessica, I'm going to come to you about the list portion. As you started to write things down, did you realize that you were getting overwhelmed, or did it really give you the confidence to just go back and say exactly what you needed because it was definitive?
A little bit of both. Just writing it down can be emotional because you see all the ways that you are quote unquote different from other athletes, and it can feel overwhelming thinking, oh my gosh, no coach is going to want to deal with this. I'm asking too much. But as you look at that whole list, you start to realize that it's not your responsibility to make your disability something that other people should be comfortable with, that it's okay to have those demands and have those adaptations. So just having that in person, I knew I could just have that physical list and show that to someone. I didn't have to be embarrassed about bringing it up.
Awesome. Yes, thank you. All right, now we're going to switch to our next question. What resources can I use to help me? Jessica, we'll start with you. What did you personally use, and what do you suggest other people to use as well?
Yeah, the first resource we went to were just online communities, which helped so much. We started finding communities when I was a young child, and then we just continued leaning on those for all of our issues, because you can find so many different disabilities in those communities, and they bring up questions that you sometimes haven't even thought about, but you realize is so pertinent to yourself. So leaning on those communities has been so wonderful. You gain so many great friends and so much insight on that, and it really helps build your confidence as a disabled athlete. And my mom loves law stuff. She's very good at understanding that. So she's really passionate about ADA law and looking into regulations to make sure that our coaches are being held responsible and accountable to things that we need, that they aren't slacking and giving us less than what we legally need or deserve or require in a certain area.
Fantastic. Thank you. Michael, what about you? What resources did you use or suggest others to use?
The first resource I ever got was from a parent/athlete. So they were my friends, and they are really huge Nordic skiers, and they were the first people that were like, you can Nordic ski without poles, it's possible. And they hooked me up with Beth Ann, who also was a coach, who also coached back then. So, and I just kind of talked to my high school coach to see if I could join and like what they were going to do, if I should like join high school or not. I did try it. It was fun, and it's a lot of work. And my coaches also go to different adaptive just like exercises for coaches to figure out like next steps, what they want to do for all training for everyone. So that's really fun.
Nice. That's awesome to hear that coaches are taking the extra step to learn a little bit more about themselves and what they can help athletes do. So that's great to hear. Tony, what about you? What resources do you suggest people take?
I think if you want to have a successful athletic life and you're a veteran, go to the VA and meet your rec therapist. Make friends with them. Like hang out with your rec therapist. They are so well connected. They're connected to resources that are they're not listed somewhere online. They might know the guy and have the number, and then all of a sudden you skip the whole line, right? And then the other recommendation I'd say is while you're out training, don't take your battle buddy with you. Go to these sports, especially if you're new in them, and try and meet a battle buddy there. Someone that's on the same level as you, that's trying to learn at the same time as you. It's very, very healing and very cathartic for warriors to be in that kind of learning environment. It's very much like being in the military. So that's my recommendation.
Nice. And Tony, I'll stick with you as well. What resources did you specifically use when you were going through everything? You were going through surgeries, you were going through debating on what sports to do and whatnot. How about your personal experience?
So my personal experience, I'll get you up to speed real quick. In 1991, I was in a barracks, got hit with a Scud missile. I had 58 surgeries to save my leg then. I was 23 years old. In my late 40s, I had some issues with that war wound, and then eventually in my 50s, when I turned 50, after having a couple bouts with cancer, they had to cut my leg off. So prior to cutting my leg off, I was in the amputee clinic. I was in talking to the chief of amputees, and I said, hey, this is the one opportunity I have in my life to be an adaptive champion, right? Like I know I get to, all they're gonna do is cut my leg off, right? They're not gonna cut out my spirit, they're not gonna cut out my warrior, or all they're gonna do is cut my leg off, and that's not gonna bother me. So what do I do so that on the other side, I can maximize this? And so we kind of planned it. So literally 6 months after I got out of the hospital, I got my leg cut off in February of 18. 4 months after that, I was out. I'm a motivational speaker. I was out doing fundraisers. And then as soon as it snowed, that was my first season. And I went to Winter Sports Clinic, and I was the fastest one in my category. And it's just from kind of saying, I'm here now. I hope to be there at some point. What are the steps in between? And just make them really small. And the biggest thing was knowing that the rec therapist was like, you should do this program. That'll help you get there the fastest.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for that. All right. So what tips and tricks can I use when advocating for myself? Jessica, we'll go to you.
Yeah, like I had said earlier, and like that first shot says, the notes helps me so much. I'm someone that I forget things if I don't write them down. So having things listed out to remind myself to discuss that and advocate for that, and then leaning on other people, that really helps me calm down and not be frustrated or over anxious about something. If I'm having a rough day with a coach, or if I'm just in a bad coaching scenario in general, being able to lean on my community and my friends and family, that they really help to remind me that it's not my responsibility to make them comfortable with me, that I'm disabled. I don't have to be ashamed of that. And I don't have to make my coaches feel indifferent about that. So really leaning on other people helps me so much, and hearing how they can advocate for themselves and just find the different ways to do that has been really helpful. They help build my confidence and allow me to have that ability and have that strength to do that.
Nice. And Jessica, did you bring anyone else with you when you started talking to your coach? Were your parents involved? Did you have other athletes or teammates that also were able to kind of support you when you were physically in that conversation?
Yeah, so back starting in middle school and high school, my parents, specifically my mom, would be there to help advocate for me. As another adult in the room, that would help her make sure that I didn't get away with less than what I needed or deserved. And then now that I'm in college, I am much more comfortable speaking alone with the coach about it, but I know I have my teammates that are so supportive of me, and I can lean on them if I need them to help me discuss something with the coach.
Nice. Thank you. Michael, what about you? What tips and tricks can I use to advocate for myself?
I would say, so I work out like every single day, and if I don't work out, I like rest. I would say writing down everything, as Jessica said, like the good, the bad, even just like, oh, I drink, I don't think I should drink 3 cups of water in the morning. I should do 2. Like things like that, just to see like in a week where you are, what's working, what's not. Also being like positive is another one that I do a lot. Like being like yes, I can do this. I want to do this, and I can succeed, even if I fall, I know I will get up. Falling is fine, wounds will heal. And then also I know that my teammates and my coaches, and I have a great network that supports me. And if I do run into something that I can't really advocate for myself, I know that I can turn to someone who can help me.
Nice. Thank you. Tony, what about you? What tips and tricks can I use, and what do you personally use when you're advocating for yourself?
Like Michael and Jessica said, you got to journal. If you're an athlete, you got to have a journal, right? You got to have a journal. It can be video, it can be written, it can be voice, but you've got to know where you started. Otherwise, you don't know if you made improvements or not. And then the thing about the battle buddy. So if my battle buddy is having a personality issue or is not communicating because with a coach or someone because they're so close to it, I can suggest my observation. Hey, you guys, does it make sense if we blah, 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 right? Or from what I see is this and this, and just interject. And I expect that the point of having a battle buddy is that they could advocate for me. Because if there's a communication error, that means that the coach and the athlete might be locked into it, right? And they're communicating the best they know how for each other. Someone else may say, hey, you guys, why don't you try this as a method? Or why don't I see this? And accepting that we're all part of the team. So.
Absolutely. And Tony, you actually do professional speaking for a living. What kind of nerves do you experience when you're getting up there? And crowds may be different than a one-on-one meeting, but what would you suggest to someone who is feeling a little bit anxious and they're about to step into that meeting or presentation?
If you're going to have a meeting, the first thing I would say is write notes. Because like Jessica said, what happens is when you're under duress, your fight or flight, your sympathetic nervous system kicks up and your fight or flight kicks up, and you get so much like this. So the other thing I would say is make sure that you relax, use good posture, take a couple of deep breaths, and then take a sip of water before you speak because it actually cools down your brain a little bit. Be calm, take a couple of deep breaths, and then work off notes, not emotion. Before you go in to speak to anyone, make sure you work through your emotions out in the car or out somewhere else. When you go to a meeting, you're a professional. You're advocating for yourself. You're your own agent. Act as if, be professional.
Awesome, thank you. I'll take some personal tips from you for my next couple of presentations, and I'll make sure I have a glass of water. So thank you for that information. Now what I'd love to do is transition over to the Q&A portion of this, and we have some questions that have come in. So I'm going to just direct those to you guys unless they're general. But my first question is, when you're advocating for yourself, how much information do you share about your disabilities? Or does sharing this information depend on the circumstance? So we'll change it up a little bit, and let's go to Michael. How much information do you share about your disabilities?
I would say how comfortable you are, depending on the situation. I myself am very comfortable with my disability, and I express that a lot, and I talk to my coaches or whatever the situation is, and I tell them the full capabilities that I can do, and that helps. But in some circumstances I may not, just depending on what it is.
Definitely, that makes sense. Tony, what about you?
I try hard not to brag, right? It's like that. And I want warriors to know that we have the opportunity to show people that a disability is not a disadvantage. So I go around like a beast mode all the time. When you see me, I'm flexing. You know I'm older than most people's dads we're talking to right now. And I'm going around and I'm jumping off stuff and skiing off stuff. I get to represent this way. I represented my country in uniform, and now I get to represent it as an athlete, as a warrior, as a champion. And so, yeah, I don't wear a prosthesis for that reason. I want you to see I'm one-legged before I kick your butt. I want people to know that most disabilities are actually not our bodies. They're right between these 6 inches. And so if you, like Michael said earlier about positive attitude, with your attitude, what you say that you can or cannot do is absolutely the truth. And I get to share that with my life. So yeah, I start with that.
Nice.
I try not to brag on it. Yeah, I try not to brag on them.
Thank you, Tony. Jessica, what about you? How much information do you share about your disability, and how does that affect the advocating situation?
Yeah, I think it just depends on the situation. Personally, I don't have many issues just discussing my disability, but I don't go out of my way to talk about it. But when I'm discussing that with a coach, I try to add in as much information that might be necessary, especially because disability is so unique to each person. You can have the same type of disability on each person, but everyone has different challenges. So I try to make sure that I relay that onto my coaches and let them know that, you know, my teammate might not have issues with temperature, and she has the same disability as I, but I have neurological issues that are different than that. So I try to be open with as much as is necessary. There's some things that maybe it's just personal to you that you don't seem to think that they need to know, and that's totally fine. You do not owe it to anyone to discuss something you're not comfortable with, but just know that you should rely on as much as you can to them, because you know your body and they don't.
Absolutely. And this is something that I think a lot of people struggle with, is they see someone or they have an athlete and they don't know how to proceed. And what would you say to people who are curious but are just too afraid to ask, whether it's how do I accommodate for you, or what is your disability? I want to learn more, but I don't want to offend you. Michael, what would you say to that, and how would you navigate that situation?
This has actually happened to me. Coincidentally, my coach has come up to me, and we had a previous conversation about my disability and just kind of like the needs I want and where I need to go. But he was like, I don't know how to ask, because we've had a couple parents and other people, part of this club, being like, who is Michael? How do I describe him? Like, I know he has a disability, but like, which one is he? Like, kind of like trying to describe it. And so I just kind of was like, I have a upper limb difference, essentially, of like no hands, no fingers, quote unquote. And so I was just like, you can tell them that I'm an adaptive athlete and I am open to questions, because questions to me is better than assuming things.
Yes, absolutely. Tony, we'll go to you next.
I'm kind of the same way like Michael. Like I just go right at it. Like I said, it's a unique situation for me because I've been on both sides, right? Like I was a beast mode, and then I served my country, and then now I'm not a beast mode, more I'm just a different beast mode, right? And so it's just a difference. And I don't think folks that aren't around adaptive athletes and around people with disabilities know that we're beast mode. They think that we're maybe fragile, or they think that, right, like, or that we're not cognitively lucid, or like and so I get to break those stereotypes, right? And so every day of my life, although it seems like I'm ferociously independent, I'm not independent. I'm like a live movie for people. Like, even my neighbors come by and go, hey man, you're really inspiration, right? Like, and they got 2 legs. We get to do that. We get to be that as athletes and as warriors. And so when we go about it that way, it's a different ride, man. It's really and honor is really a prestigious ride, and that's what I'm experiencing.
Thank you. And Jessica, same question will go to you about questions and how have you navigated that situation before?
Yeah, so for me, as a general rule, I tell people that it's okay to ask questions, but just know that you might not get a response or the response that you want. For some people, if a stranger comes up to them and asks them, it's not comfortable to talk about that, or if they're not close with a person, it might be uncomfortable or bring up bad memories for them. Personally, for most days, I'm comfortable discussing this, and I would rather educate them than anything. But my teammates know that there sometimes are just lines that you don't want to cross at certain times, or you need to be cautious about that. But like Michael said, I would rather them discuss that with me than assume things, because disability is not universal, and I would love to discuss things on my specific situation as much as I can.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys. And Tony, did you have something to add?
Yeah, and may I also throw in, especially for warriors, go easy approaching people in wheelchairs from behind and touching them. That's what a lot of people do, and their intentions are, I just wanted to, and how it's sometimes perceived is, you think you have power over me, that's why you're touching me. Because when I was 6 foot tall and 200 pounds, strangers didn't walk up and put their hands on me, right? And so go easy on that. If you want to have a conversation, come up and shake my hand like a man or like a human being. Treat me like you would ordinarily, and then you can ask me anything. If you come up and lean down and touch me, and I don't know you, and you're putting your hands on me like you have pity for me, that doesn't often work, especially for the warriors out there, right? We're transitioning, and we're trying to get our minds around this too. And so the questions help us heal. Condescension, and platitudes don't, right? We're in there trying to deal with that battle. So just approach us straight up and say, hey, thank you for your service. What happened? What's your deal, right?
Absolutely. Thank you. It's always good to be direct in a polite manner, and disability etiquette, we know, is something that a lot of people lack, and that's okay as long as you're trying to educate. So I think what you guys talked about is don't assume, come and talk to me is awesome. So thank you for that information. I have another question here. It says, do you have any good advice when the coach is not supportive of the athlete with the disability? Positive advocating when the coach is not supportive is not easy. So let's go to Tony. We'll start with you. What advice do you have if someone is not being supportive as of right now, and how can they change that?
Depending on what your resources are. Honestly, like I said, sometimes communication styles just don't go together. And depending on the emotional intelligence of the coach as well as the athlete, sometimes you just can't get there. If you have the ability, maybe you look at a different team. Even look at a different sport for a second and check in. Like, no, I really want to do, okay, so then what are you willing to do this, right? That's on your side. And then on the other side, more advocacy. You got to bring the heat. That's why we have a chain of command. And so if Jessica starts and then her mom helps, and if that doesn't get it done, then we're into the big guns already, right? Like the next thing is we have to go get some kind of outside advocacy. It's imperative, right? And so check yourself to make sure you're not the problem. And if it's personalities or if it's being denied access, there's difference, right? You don't have to like your coach. You have to follow what they ask you to do so that you can optimize potentially. If you don't feel like they have your best interest in mind, then you need to advocate for yourself and consider your options. Maybe this is the best team. Maybe the coach has to go. That sometimes happens. But most likely, there can be a solution locally if all parties understand what they have vested in the game.
Yes, thank you. Jessica, we'll turn it over to you. What advice do you have for a coach who's not supportive?
Yeah, so I've had a few different coaches throughout my years that have been fairly unsupportive of me, and I've had to learn to go from the positive, happy advocating to more of a strict advocating, and tell them that, like, straight up, I'm just as valued, or I should be just as valued as an athlete as anyone else, and not be afraid to sort of tell them the hard truth about it. You know, I don't like, as I said, don't like confrontation, don't like telling people that I feel mistreated, but there are times where you need to do that, and it's not going to get it through their mind just by kind of skating by it. So yeah, it can't be sugar-coated, and it's not easy to go through that. I, in high school, ended up having to find coaches on the outside of my high school team that would be able to help me, because my high school team did not, some athletes and some coaches just were not good with supporting me and advocating for me. So I was able to thankfully find someone on the outside. And like Tony said, there hopefully are people and places in the area that you can go for other coaching. There's not always a vast availability, but it does not hurt to look into other options than what you have, because you deserve better than that.
Absolutely. Thank you. Michael, turning over to you, what advice do you have for someone who is not supportive?
I would say find support somewhere else. As Tony and Jessica has mentioned, look outside of where you are, of anywhere, like even just asking a parent of your best friend who also does the sport, like ask for help from them, ask your best friend, like just advocate for yourself and try to find a way around it. And
Yeah, thank you. And we have an awesome membership network for Move United, and we are now over, I think, 155 chapters. We're bringing in new people, bringing in new members, and that's a perfect opportunity. If you are struggling to find somewhere or find someone that isn't knowledgeable and isn't supportive, that membership network right there is a great resource, and we'd encourage you guys to check it out. We all know that you guys know about it, obviously, as panelists, but as attendees, that's a perfect place to start if you need help. I had a question about role models. What type of role models do you guys currently have, whether it's sports specific or general? And Tony, we'll start with you.
Man, that's a great question, Lily. My role models are much younger now. I'm at an age where I'm intentionally, since the day I've been injured, I knew that I got to be, since the day I earned this Purple Heart, I knew that I was, like, life's going to be different for me. So from now on, I knew that everything that I did could be viewed by the public or viewed by someone. That's what a hero did. And so from that day, I started inspiring other people. So the people that inspire me are the kids, are the people that keep their purity of the sport, their purity of life. People that have gone through life, I meet warriors, I meet people that have had disabilities, that have been born with them. They've navigated this stuff their whole life. And when I meet them, folks like Jessica and Michael, and when they shine, and other ones, like I hung around the E group just here in Mount Stowe in February for a week. Those are my inspirations, right? Hanging around the people that are getting it, hanging around the people. There was a warrior that had some fear, and I watched him overcome it on the mountain. That's my inspiration, right? That, like, stuff like that, you don't get to, like, how do you quantify that? And so those are my mentors or my role models, are people that are entering into this adaptive thing. It's fearful, and there's no other way to say it. You are terrified. The first time I strapped on a ski, I was terrified. So the people that are that show the fortitude in spite of the fear to go on, and that's my inspiration. That's why I get up every day.
Thank you. Jessica, what about you? Who are your role models?
My role models my whole life have always been my sisters. I am the middle of 3 girls, so grew up with me with my disability, and they were right alongside me with everything I've dealt with, and they truly were my first advocates. My parents have so many stories of them advocating for me on the playground when we were playing as kids and dealing with questions and everything. So seeing how people can help me even when they're not in that situation, they had both their legs, they were never disabled, but they could empathize with my situation, and they fought for me even though they didn't have to. So seeing that really put a perspective on the world, knowing that there were people that would help me even if they didn't understand my situation. So I always look up to them and really try to guide my life off of them, knowing that they could advocate for someone, and I try to do the same with other people.
Thank you. Michael, what about you? Who are your role models currently?
One of my role models is the one who got me she got me into Nordic skiing, actually, and her family is amazing, and we're still really good friends. And she was the one who was like, it is possible, you don't have to ski with poles. She really wanted me to try it, and having that like positive attitude and basically just saying like, we can work through this, don't worry, like, even though the coach didn't give us a workout, or this may be too hard, let's try something else. Like, I was trying to find a loophole for me to see if I can do it, and then also supporting me along this journey of making it to different competitions and training harder.
Thank you. All right, and my final question here, in regard to advocating for yourself, what would you recommend to individuals? Would you recommend an in-person meeting, more of a paper trail via email? How would you navigate that situation, and what is the best opportunity, or is it a combination of both? And Michael, we'll actually start with you.
I think it's a combination of both, depending on the circumstance. If they're in a different state, maybe it might be a little harder to be in person, but it's what you feel comfortable with, and also what the other person feels comfortable with, and the time also and place.
Nice, thank you. Jessica, what about you? I know you said you are not a component of confrontation, so is a paper trail a little bit better via email?
They're definitely my more comfortable areas, but I try really hard to do in person when I can, because it's easier to treat someone well if they're in front of you and an actual person. So seeing that and just being eye to eye helps them feel more comfortable with you as a person. It helps you feel more comfortable with knowing that I am a person and I deserve this. So I'm very much more comfortable writing emails about it, but if I can, I try really hard to be in-person advocate.
Awesome, thank you. And Tony, what about you?
You know, I prefer in person, right? You miss those nuances, and those, our communication is actually 80% nonverbal. And so you miss those little things, people's emotions, their faces, how they squint, how they receive something you said. You might bring something to someone's attention and see that, oh, they really didn't know. Or you can see that you did know. So why are we doing it, right? And then in the cases now, because of COVID and other things, if you have to write an email, accompany video with it. If somebody sees it, you can't stop what they saw, right? You can, and in fact, you can actually guide it with what you wrote. Or you might notice in this video, you might see how that, right? And then people will see your point that way. Or do, like we're doing, a virtual, because of the 80%, right, the body language. But in those cases, make sure you write your notes.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Tony. All right, so we are going to transition out of the Q&A portion now. Thank you for everyone who submitted questions. We appreciate all your great answers and things that you're proposing to the group. So I just wanted to do some summary slides, and panelists, feel free to tune in as well if we missed anything or you want to add anything. But for do's, athletes should write down what you need. We've all talked about it. It helps us organize our thoughts, and it helps us stay clear and concise. Research solutions, whether it's using your coaches, your parents, your teachers, ask them what they suggest and what they've experienced, and then figure out, can the ADA or Americans with Disabilities Act support those? So you'll find those solutions in that way. And then communicate your needs. A lot of us had said that we want to have conversations in person. We can feel that emotion, and we can really just have more of a common conversation together. So schedule that time to discuss those solutions. And Jessica and Michael and Tony, you had all said if you need to bring in other people to support you, especially if you are a young athlete and you're not getting what you need, then bring in your parents, bring in other coaches. But definitely stay determined and don't give up. Jessica, you had mentioned that you've had to go through a few different coaches, unfortunately, but you went on to the Paralympics and you were clearly successful, so you kept on it, and that's what we encourage you to do. For don'ts, don't get frustrated. It's understandable that not everyone is going to be knowledgeable about your disability, about the accommodations that you can make, that they can make. So just stay calm and know that there is a solution at some point in time. If you need to bring other people in, then that's fine too. It's probably very easy to blame everyone, but it may only be just one person that's your barrier, or it may just be that they don't know what they need to do. So it's not just everyone else's fault. You can make a solution and find how to kind of successfully get everything done. And don't give up. Continue to push through and persevere. So what should someone do next? If their programs are not meeting their needs, what do I need to do? Think about your current programs, write down what you need, communicate what you need, whether it's with the teachers and parents and coaches. find those solutions, and then plan that time. Go ahead. Now is actually a perfect time for quarantine. A lot of people are at their computers all day, and so start kind of formulating your thoughts, and when people are able to return to play, then hopefully those programs will be successful, they'll be inclusive. So thank you to everyone and all your information. I encourage you all to go follow them on social media or check out a website. We have Jessica and Michael and Tony's social media handles on there, and we want you guys to have as many followers as possible. You're all great advocates, and we really appreciate you being on here today. Lastly, if you haven't already checked out Move United's Adapt at Home page, you can find it at www.moveunitedsport.org. We have a lot of programs on there. It's sport-specific things, training, education, and things are happening live as well as they're saved for on demand. So if you're bored at home, if you want to have that community where you're working out live with other people in meetings, we encourage you to go on there. We encourage you to then tag us on social media at Move United Sport and use the hashtag Adapt at Home to show us how you're moving. It's a great opportunity to stay involved and stay connected, and we'd love to see you all. At this point in time, I'm actually going to turn it over to Great Lakes Adaptive Sports Association. Thank you, panelists, for being here, as well as thank you for GLASA for including us in the GLASA Games. We're honored to be here, and you guys had such great information. I'm going to even take some of your own tips and tricks and apply it to my life as well. So thank you. And Michaela, if you are here as well, you can hop back in, and I know you're going to wrap us up a little bit.
Thank you so much, Lily and Jessica and Michael and Tony, for that wonderful insight into how we can advocate for ourselves and for our athletes. But thank you all for tuning in for today's session. We do have two more, one at 4 p.m. Central, which is an injured military fitness challenge, which all are welcome, as well as a 6 p.m. Central social. We do have sessions going throughout Saturday and Sunday if you're able to tune in. Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful rest of your day and weekend.